I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up. Then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back to the Do Hard Things podcast with Lexi and Gabe. Today's guest is Jon Mayo, founder and leadership partner who helps high-performing founders turn chaos into clarity and friction into flow. Through his Waymaker ethos, Strive methodology, and principles of steward leadership, Jon works with visionaries who've hit the ceiling, not from lack of effort, but from lack of alignment. His work helps founders recalibrate from the inside out, build execution rhythm, and scale with conviction instead of burnout. This isn't coaching, it's partnership. It's a realignment of who you are and how you lead. Jon, welcome to the show.
Welcome, everyone, to the Do Hard Things podcast with your hosts, Gabe and Lexi. And you'll see that we are wearing our black on black Waymaker shirts. I'm so excited about this. And that's because we have Jon, who is the founder of Waymaker, wearing our podcast, Do Hard Things shirt. We actually sent shirts to each other before so we can represent each other's brands. And I'm so happy that you're on the show. Jon, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Excited to dive in.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So let's just jump right into it. We heard your bio. Everyone now knows who you are. And really, you've helped founders really turn chaos into clarity, you like to say. So using Waymaker's ethos and Strive methodology. So what's this origin story of yours? How did you get into this? And how did you really realize that, founders struggle and you are there to help them with alignment? Talk us through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized that founders struggle because people struggle because I was struggling. So I left the military, served my time, left, and was really frustrated back in 2020 or so, just with what I was seeing happen in the world and feeling completely and utterly helpless to do anything about it and wanting to create a splash and impact. And the more I was wrestling with what I was seeing, the more I was realizing how helpless I was to do anything about it because I was running through the countryside of, high elevation living in Colorado and didn't have a lever to utilize to create any change. And the result of that wrestling, having a strong entrepreneurial bent and wanting to help people was, well, why don't you have a lever? And that was a hard question to ask because it required once again to look in the mirror. And there's going to be a theme on the hardest thing you can do is sitting down in silence and looking yourself in the mirror and realizing that you are the person responsible for everything you're experiencing in your life, which is interesting because if you look at your life right now as a system that is perfectly designed to create the results you're experiencing, then that can be a hard pill to swallow if the results are not what you want. The good news is you can change the system so that it produces the results you want and is then perfectly designed for those optimal results. So going back to the origin story, running through that, already having left a successful career in the military because I didn't like what I saw in the mirror and needed to make some changes, it was really round 2.0. And that's where it all began of like, well, what if I could change the world through conquering myself? And what would that look like as it scales beyond my home community into the professional setting, into change management, into crisis solving, into creating living legacy and highly profitable organizations that are people forward. And the rest was history.
That's awesome. And before developing that framework, do you think it mainly came from your experience and your misalignment, or do you think it was a combination of that along working side by side leaders and seeing that they're also having that struggle?
Yes, and it's a hypothesis until improved upon. So one of the things that I found makes it very difficult, whether you're jumping into a system like EOS or something like the military planning process, MDMP, or whatever your body of work is, right? Standard project management. They're all like fossils. They're frozen snapshots in time of what worked based on evidence and trial and error at that time. What keeps them evolving? What keeps them alive? That's a lot of what Strive and the overarching Waymaker ethos looks at. It's what's working today, what has worked, where do we see things going, and how do we evolve in real time with new data in a way that's actually functionally impactful, both on the individual level, but also as that echoes into your organization. And that creates very effective compounding loops that allow us to systemize for success. So it's my own work, observation, study, and continued experimentation. Thank you, Gabe.
So was that a clear vision really from the start, or did that really evolve through real work with, with other founders? Because you're blending systems like mindset, right? Execution, stewardship, like, and it's into an operating system, like you mentioned. So how did that actually, start from that clear vision, or was it working with those founders that you started evolving that?
It started by letting go of a statement in pursuit of a question. So I'm a huge proponent of let's find a beautiful question to pursue as opposed to let's have another vision statement, another mission we put on the wall. Oh, here's a tenet. Like, this is our value, guys. Pound your chest. No one cares.
Right.
So what if we could find a question that everyone actually cared about? For myself, it's how might I unleash human potential? And the reason I share that now is because in asking that question back in 2020 and realizing, ooh, I needed a question to pursue, not a statement, it began to evolve into what we're talking about today. That question gave birth to Waymakers, gave birth to Strive, gave birth to the universal learning approach and everything else that is put together to create the operating system and the suite of tools that we're currently developing and how we show up for people in the world. And it is an and answer because it's the ruthless, relentless, disciplined application on oneself and internally, as well as learning from all of our clients that we partner with. And I've built a business that's such a gift because every time I interact with one of my partners, the entire operating system's improving because I'm taking notes from every conversation and they're going into how we're growing. Same with how I raise my children. Every time I'm on a podcast, everything that's a learning helps to inform and create positive growth in everything we're discussing here, whether it be the operating system or the overarching praxis.
Awesome. And sometimes you say more is not the answer, alignment is. What do you think the biggest myth founders believe about solving friction in their business? And why do you think it's keeping them stuck there?
I think the myth is that it's going to take a complicated, sexy solution to make their life better. And the reality is that it will feel insultingly simple, whatever the solution is. The bummer and the good news is to realize that simple is not easy. So here's a really fun, for instance, if you want to be healthy or lose weight, eat less, work out more. No one likes that. And we spend billions of dollars a year on trying to make it less simple than that. So we feel better about the game. So what we do is we jump in and find what is the true simple response that's needed here. We're not going to hide behind noise and trash, but then we're going to engineer that simple answer into action. And that's really where I see myself and what we do coming in, because it's one thing to know, oh, if I eat less and work out more, I'll lose weight. It's another thing to know how to take the next step and then have the following step be informed by the first one? And how do we do that in a really dynamic way that creates energy and momentum? And that's where we come in. It's like, hey, like, yeah, you could be sold this 30-page doc and feel good for a week and spend 30K, or we could have a ruthlessly candid conversation, identify the critical next step that could transform everything and take it, and then see what the next step is after that. And that really creates a different experience.
So I'm a big Formula One fan, and the new Formula One movie came out, and there was something, it was a cliche that was put in there, and it was like really mind bending for me. And it was slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And when he said that, I was like, wow, that's incredible, right? Slowing down to be smooth, but being smooth equals fast. So slow is technically, fast. I know that's kind of oxymoronic, but it makes sense when you think about it. So let's talk about misalignment, right? With founders, especially because they're conditioned, and I was back in the day too, that if you work more or you work harder, that's what's going to break through that plateau and break through to be more successful. But that's really not true, right? So why does that approach fail, especially in, a high, volume or a high agency type leaders?
Work more and work harder on what? That's the issue, right? So it's really simple to try to brute force your way through something, but all of that which you're spending your energy on is ineffective to solve the root problem. And the alignment piece, the move slow to move fast, right? All tie together in that, hey, in the conversation where we can identify, okay, here's where we are, here's where we want to go. What's the biggest thing in the way? And once we identify that and have agreement on that with whoever needs to do that, then let's work as hard and as aggressively as we can on that one thing. And it's amusing because I work with people all the time. I focus on a small number of highly selective partnerships. Even in longer term relationships, it's incredible how we will still, as humans, default to complexity over aligned, simple, powerful action. And a great litmus test would be this, and this could be really helpful if it's like, well, how do we get aligned? If you're a leader and you say, our priority today is to make it rain Skittles. We're just going to have fun with this because no one said we can't have fun. Then I would say, okay, that's our priority. Yes, that's our number one priority for today. Yes, okay, show me your calendar. Because if your calendar isn't blocked, that the number one priority is to make it rain Skittles, and I don't see that anywhere on your calendar, then we are already off and we need to begin doing some realignments. And it all starts there. So whatever the initiative is, people want to have this comprehensive plan, but we suck at actioning complexity. So let's get an idea of the plan that prepares us for the direction to go. Then let's identify the next step and let's take it deliberately, aggressively, and intentionally. And what's cool is when you do that, you're moving slow, but the progress picks up in pace and compounds.
And would you say when founders carry more than they admit, most of the time the biggest cost of that misalignment is them burning out, culture leak, stalled momentum, or is there something else you're seeing?
I think everyone carries more than they admit. The problem becomes when you do not communicate through that healthily to make sure that movement's continuing forward. Today, with my culture guardian, which is my chief marketing officer equivalent, we care about names, so we have fun with those. But today, we had the conversation where it's like, hey, I took this project from you. Yes. Then stop hounding me every day on things. The very things I'm teaching, right? But not to do. I found myself doing. And I'm willing to share that because we also have the system in place for that conversation to occur. We then in real time set a lightweight twice a week huddle in place to solve the root cause of why I was reaching out. So the reason I share that in direct response to your question is because the burnout comes from a lack of understanding of what is occurring. And that often comes because you isolate yourself. And that happens because there's not radically candid conversation. If your team can step in and say, hey, what is this? And help you identify that, then that changes everything. And it's really important to also acknowledge it takes a lot of work to cultivate a team that can do what we just discussed. So if you don't have that, if you don't even have that practice for yourself to understand that you may be carrying things that are leading you away from your true north, that's where it's extremely helpful to find someone you can confide in, because the truth also is you can't vent down as a founder without negative effects. So who do you go to have those conversations and begin to forge forward accordingly?
Yeah, so let's talk about two things. Let's talk about noise, right? And let's talk about fear. And I know people talk about fear all the time, but especially in a founder's life, right? I'm always dealing with this, right? Fear. Are we going to do better? Are we going to do worse? Are we going to grow? There's a lot of people's, lives at stake. This is their family. I'm thinking about that all the time, right? And then I have all the noise coming at me, and you're getting these distractions. So how does the Waymaker ethos really help leaders kind of transcend and move into clarity, right, as opposed to noise, and conviction, right, as opposed to fear?
All right, let's go on a little bit of an adventure. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So fear is a mind killer. I think that's from Dune. Not really sure, but I love the premise. And to answer your question, we just have to look at three things swiftly: the past, the present, and the future. If we look at the past, we can feel emotions of gratitude and learnings if we just visit there shortly. But if we really begin to dwell on the past, we'll start to experience things like sorrow, regret, desire for what was, all of which rob us from the present and create a fear that we won't experience them again. If we look to the future, and this is more where I see founders struggle, if we just look to it with intention to help us plan and to help us prepare so that we can move forward with greater violence of action, then all we see is opportunity and excitement. But if we dwell on the future, we start to feel anxiety and fear. Why? Because there's a lot of bad things that can happen. The current time is a gift, which is why it's called the present. And though that's cheesy, it's true. And one of the greatest ways we can re-anchor ourselves in the present is by simply putting into action a short time of reflecting on gratitude. So, and gratitude ties the past, the present, and the future together. So for instance, if you're starting to be anxious about anything in the past or the present, you can begin to think about what would it look like as an opportunity and what am I grateful for now that can help me solve it. And that can begin to shift the emotional response, which is neat. But the other thing is, anytime you're feeling that anxiety or fear, you are time traveling. We are time traveling as humans. And the reality is we're wasting our energy on the unknown. So we can identify, okay, why am I time traveling? I'm worried about this thing. All right. That puts us at a fork in the road. And at that fork in the road, we can either release it to come back to the present where we can solve the problem, or we could ask, is there something that my subconscious is trying to tell me that I should put into place? Right? Like, is there something I'm trying to get a hold of? And if the answer is no, then we need to tell it to stuff it and pay back attention to the present. And that's where the gratitude can be helpful to get us back grounded into the actions we can take today. And there's ways to systemize that for success. And one of those ways is about to be released in beta testing beyond what I do directly with my clients. So it's kind of fun.
We can't wait to see it. That's awesome.
When you're working with founders and they come to you saying they're ready to realign and get things moving, do you find most of the time they really are ready to realign, or is there a lot of coaching that you have to do there to get them on the right mindset of what realignment actually looks like?
We will have that answer before anyone's in a formal relationship with me. Before that partnership's founded, we will know that, because it's critical for us to do work together, and it's why I work with a very small portfolio by design. Oftentimes people think they want it, but they're wrong, or they're not ready. So to answer your question, a lot of people get filtered out because they think they want to be at point B, but in reality, they just want the trappings of point B. It's kind of like the old saying, if you want to eat, then you need to hunt, right? Like, yeah, many like eating, few like hunting, because it's hard and messy and dirty and painful to do that hunting. The same is true here. If you tell me that you want to have a highly profitable organization in which people feel unleashed to pursue their highest version of themselves, and you're creating impact, whole while winning it at the bank, then that means you had better prepare to evolve. And if you're not willing to evolve yourself, then we are incompatible, because others can come in and fix your organization superficially. But if we're not going to accept that all of it starts with that point leader, then it's not a good match. And that's where that dissonance is so large, because we can have a conversation and they're correctly identifying 10 things that are wrong in the organization, but they're missing all of the fingers pointing back at themselves for the reason that that system is allowed to exist in the first place. And we have to get that fixed so that we can proceed to handling any of the other elements, because they are superficial and secondary to the core issues within that leader.
So in our old office, when we were working in an office, we had these very bold signs on the wall, right? People had like, oh, like leadership or like, legacy, like, the what like like a whale or something like that. But this was different, much different. And it was very bold and almost felt awkward because I was like doing interviews and bringing new candidates to the office, and some people reacted positively and we usually hired them and said some people like didn't, and we're like, okay, maybe they're not the right fit. But one of them said potential sucks, right? And the other one said get shit done. So it's about like the execution, right? Like these ideas and these methodologies are great, but it's just, if you don't actually do the work and execute, it really doesn't matter. And founders sometimes are these big ideas people. Like I know a lot of founders that are just, they have these amazing ideas, but they don't, if they don't have their, your number two, like you said, your person on your team that actually get it done, then maybe it's not going to work. Or the opposite, maybe they are get it done people, and that's why they are where they are in life. But walk us through this execution piece of it, because you say it's an operating system. That's not a buzzword, right? So what does that mean in practice when founders really need to start installing this system and actually making it happen? Walk us through that.
The bigger question of what you're asking, Gabe, is twofold. One's really the integrator versus visionary, and how do those roles align? And then the second is, how do we systemize for success, both within that relationship, or how do you do it if you're one person, and then throughout the team?
Yeah.
I am a visionary by nature, implementer and integrator by praxis. By practice. So I had to learn how to do both. And, shooting large projectiles across the horizon that can kill people really was a good forcing function for me to learn to do both. So thank you, Uncle Sam, for that opportunity. But then carrying that forward over time, it's really interesting because a lot of the work I do is between the visionary and the integrator in organizations. So it typically starts working with that visionary because that's typically the CEO or founder. And then as they scale and they have their CEO or equivalent, there seems to be a meshes. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to do good stuff there. Now, regardless of where you are, you have to choose if you're going to have your cake or eat it. And I think it simply comes down to simplify the equation. If you're a visionary, many visionaries I found are proud to be visionaries, and that's great. And they have all these ideas and they want to act them, and that's great. And here's a quick litmus test. If you want to put it into action, are you willing to be disciplined to put it into action? Or do you just like being able to be frustrated and throw your hands up and saying nothing's getting done and I have these great ideas and look at me? Because the reality is you can be the best visionary in the world, but if you don't figure out how to either empower, inspire, and lead someone else to enact it, or to enact the discipline on yourself to put it into action, you're just going to be another noisy mouthpiece with great ideas that no one cares about because you're not in the arena building it. And I think it starts with that conversation with yourself, because if you are a solo visionary, then there are many ways that we can systematically begin to help you take action on building what you want to build until you're able to partner with people to help take over that for you.
Yeah, and caring for others and having others on your team there for you is super important. And steward leadership is central to your philosophy. How is that different from traditional leadership models? And why does it matter for founders who want to scale meaning, not just metrics?
Yeah. So steward leadership is standing on the shoulders of servant leadership, right? If servant leadership was like a giant that's really helped to progress this idea, like let's go past factory working where the only thing that matters is output and everyone else can get ground up by the machine. I think servant leadership really stepped into the gap to try and solve like, hey, maybe we should care about the human capital side of this, right? Like we're all here spending most of our lives here. Can we do that well? And without just churning each other up. But it also created an issue, especially in junior leaders, where they would burn themselves out at the stake, serving their team, serving the mission, and they would become ineffective to continue. And that's where I identified the what I make the argument for is a need for steward leadership. And the difference between servant and steward is a matter of perspective and analysis that allows you to take your stand. So, for example, in servant leadership, you would say, how can I best serve Lexi to get her job done? How can I best serve Gabe to get his? How can I best serve X to do Y? Right? And then pour myself out to do those things. In steward leadership, I'd ask those same questions, but I'd also be forced to ask, how do I ensure that I am growing and maintaining myself such that I'm doing all these things for Lexi, Gabe, and the organization in a manner that's pouring from a cup that's overflowing and not running dry? How do I do all of that and ensure that I don't destroy the land on which we're working, because then I have nothing to do, right? It broadens the question of critical success criteria to ensure that it can continue going. And then from there, you get to work.
Right. So I've heard you say that you work with founders that are, and I'm putting in quotes for people listening, that you're done chasing playbooks, right? So what's that difference between following a framework or building really your own rhythm, right? Tell me one thing that you do to help leaders make that shift.
To kill some assumptions, the primary difference between a methodology and a playbook is a step action. It's kind of like a standard operating procedure, right? EOS is an excellent integrator of a playbook, entrepreneur operating system. Come in, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do it. It's going to produce some better results. That's, a playbook. A methodology is understanding the art along with the science. So it's understanding, how might I adapt this proven truth to what is needed here in the simplest, most effective way possible. And that is a learned skill, which is where the partnership is helpful, but it's also able to be done individually. And that can look very simply like this. All right, I keep saying that this is our number one priority and nothing's happening on it, and I'm getting frustrated. I'm going to pull up my calendar and look at how I'm allocating time to this priority. It is hilarious that typically the amount of time in a month is near to zero on the calendar, but it's talked about every day. And that's one step you can immediately take. All right. Even without knowing how or what might be a helpful way of putting time on the calendar, you can just determine that every week I'm putting an hour and I'm going to talk to so-and-so about this priority until we start to figure out how to do this. That's one of the ways that a methodology is more impactful, because you can take a thought and you can produce meaningful action with a little bit of intentional wrestling. If you don't want to do any of it, you just want an out-of-the-box solution, then go find a playbook and hope and pray that it works. But a methodology allows your own intentional insight and understanding of the dynamics of your situation, what your constraints and strengths are, to be applied to create the maximum impact.
Let's talk results. What does success look like for the founders you partner with? Is it profitability, clarity, momentum, legacy, combination? What do you think the real ROI of realignment is in your eyes?
In my eyes, it is a combination of extraordinary profitability and growth fiscally, simultaneous with a cultural revolution in which the team is empowered, equipped, and inspired to take a lead at every level in the organization. And hilarious, well, what maybe not hilarious, but they always go hand in hand, and the former leads the prior. So I spoke the prior first, being the money, because that's what people want to hear, and then surprise with the people. But the reality is if you want the money, you have to go through the people, and to go through the people, you have to partner with them and lead and influence certain actions so that we can all actually be leading to win, which means you have to have a default perspective that humans are capable of doing good things and not just a means to an end. But if you can accept that, then by working on yourself in the ways we've been sharing and beginning to take actions to systematically empower your team to do the same and have the appropriate communication channels in place to ensure that balls aren't being dropped, you can really begin to see the results aggressively on the financial side. And what we're seeing there is 6-figure adjustments in the first 90 days, typically, with 7-figure adjustments in the first 6 to 9 months. And those are in 8-figure companies. So imagine larger ones, right? You're talking about 10 to 20% of the entire operating revenue potential and profit of an organization based on the companies I'm enjoying dancing with right now.
So let's double down on culture, right? with what you were just mentioning. And who is your CMO? You said Culture Guardian. Is that
Yeah,
what you?
culture guardian.
I love that title. By the way. Um, so let's talk about that. You said before, culture stops leaking energy, right? And customers feel that shift, and then profit follows. And you're just explaining that. Can you give us maybe a more in-depth example of maybe a founder that you've experienced, who's experienced that transformation through your work?
Yeah, so you want an example of one of those I've worked with's cultural transformation?
Sure.
Okay. Um, Absolutely. I think just to start that, we have to acknowledge that there is no universal culture. And that's a huge misunderstanding, even engaging in this like in this question, right? In this moment, because you can roll your eyes at a universal culture because it's nothing, right? There's
Can
no
I just jump in? Can
yeah.
I got to jump in here because it's so funny that you just said that because people always say, "How is the culture? Do you have a great culture?" In the interview process, I'm the final interview in many cases here, and how's the culture? And we love our culture. We have amazing culture, in my opinion. Our employees post about it without any prompting whatsoever on LinkedIn. It's great to see. But then my response to that question is, well, what does a good culture look like to you? And then I get deer in the headlights,
Mhm.
right? So no one has a good understanding of what a good culture is. Maybe they're just asking the question because ChatGPT told them to ask that question. I don't know in the interview process, but I think it's such an important question, and I think it's so important to have an amazing culture. But I feel like some people don't know what it is that they're looking for when it comes to culture, and I think it blends to what you just said. That there is no one culture. So, can you help me unpack that as well? I know it's a
Heck yeah.
two pronged question, but I'm just so curious.
Let's send it, man. So culture is the agreed upon or accepted behaviors of a group of people. So, a cultural element of your organization may be that it is more acceptable to wear black shirts than white ones, right? If someone starts showing up in pink shirts with kittens as their virtual backdrop, that is going to go against what the accepted norm of the group is, right? And we're going to want to revert to what the culture of our group is, the accepted norms. No, let's get something slick and clean in the backdrop. Get rid of the pink kitten, man. We're here to look sharp, right? So this is a playful tongue-in-cheek example, but the reality is, how does that look when it comes to deadlines, punctuality, communication? How do you show up for a sales call, right? Are you prepared before you round the corner and walk up and knock on the door? Or are you fumbling around in your car before you walk into that diner for that conversation, right? Why did I choose those two examples? I don't know. But they show examples of like, what do we currently tolerate as acceptable behaviors in our group? That's what a culture is.
Yep.
So like if asking someone, hey, what culture do you want? What you're really asking is like, hey, what do you want your lived experience to be? Do you want to be pushed for excellence or do you want to be left alone to just do your work? Do you want to be able to look like a slob that doesn't care? Or do you want to be pressed to be sharp and present yourself well, right? Those are what make up a group's culture. So first identifying what is our culture? What are our current norms, right? That we operate on. That is a really helpful place to start. And then saying, okay, where do we want to go? And it typically is on a spectrum. And that spectrum can be viewed through the lens of shifting Overton's window, which for those who are not familiar is a socio and political case study of how can you shift a nation state as an example, but it also works for a family. It also works for yourself. It also works for a company. And if you just imagine a simple line, on one side is trash and on the other side is excellence. Somewhere between trash and excellence, there's going to be a little rectangle, and that rectangle represents your organization's culture. So to move that rectangle of what those accepted norms are currently more towards excellence, if that's what you want, you need to, one, understand where you are and what excellence looks like. And then two, what is the next incremental step to begin getting us there? Now, what's really interesting is it's the founder's job to repeat themselves until they're made fun of about what excellence looks like, all the while incrementally, intentionally, relentlessly, and with discipline, applying new standards that slowly shift the window so what is normalized behavior becomes more and more a picture of what that excellence looks like. And we see that in everyone I partner with, we see the fruit of that within the first 90 days beginning. Now, in full transparency, it takes a year to reach escape velocity. typically between 9 and 12 months, you start to get the compound effect of people really taking in these new norms and helping drive that momentum. But you begin to see a shift in how people bring problems. Here's a great, for instance, end of last week, I was speaking with one of the founders I partner with, and we're talking about one of his C-suite and a problem set that he was bringing. And these are high caliber, intelligent, driven. No one would look at them and say they're unsuccessful high performers. They are high performers, right? And yet the problem sets that they're working on for across the organization are always still being brought in the, hey, what do you think of this? Can I do that? Well, we're moving to an intent-based leader culture, which means, hey, here's a problem. Here's what I intend to do about it, which is completely different because you're not asking for permission. And this is at the C-suite level. This isn't like your new manager who's just coming out of a sales role. He didn't realize that he just got hit by a train called a complete career transition, which is just kind of a fun thing for those who go from sales to leadership. And he called me excitedly because he said, hey, Jon, it's the first time in the 6 years since the company's been founded that a leader's come to me with something they intend to do instead of asking permission. Now, imagine what happens when everyone from your newest team member to your C-suite is all coming forward to their leaders and their teammates and saying, hey, I intend to do this. Here's what I see. And then that communication occurs, any adjustments are made, and then you move forward. What does that do? It transforms everything. So that's an example functionally of how that applies, built upon the foundation of what the heck is culture anyways.
Great answer. And for the founder listening who's tired of the chaos, who knows something needs to shift, not sure where to start, what's one thing they can do this week to begin that recalibration?
Of course, aside from like the gimmicky, well, let's talk. The actual helpful answer is schedule 15 minutes. 15 minutes with yourself. And turn it all off, put a blank piece of paper, and in that 15 minutes, answer the question, what am I tolerating that is giving permission to everything I hate? And that's actually a fresh take, but that is the take I would do in this instance, because if you can have the courage to wrestle with that question, then everything else will begin to follow suit, especially given the context of our conversation.
Jon, you are so knowledgeable. I absolutely love that culture answer as well. And I think so many founders are going to be reaching out to you in our audience. Who are those right people to give you a call? And what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, let's see. So sanity check, right? We just had the actual thing that you can do. Here's the thing to wrestle with. Should you want to reach out? Am I willing to accept that I'm the whole problem, not part of the problem?
All right, that just cut out a lot of people, Jon. I'm sorry.
I'm okay with that, right? Like,
I know you are.
we didn't even get to talk about signal to noise, right? But let's only have the good conversations, right? Let's not waste our time. So are you willing to admit you're the whole problem? Are you willing to do something about it? And are you willing to ask for help in doing so? If so, here's the good news. I'm not a guru, but I am a co-adventurer, and we can create what's needed together for your specific work situation and life situation if you're able to swallow that bitter humility pill first. And then the best way to get a hold of me would be jonmayo.com, hold the H, not the Mayo. So jonmayo.com or on LinkedIn at the same name.
I love it, Jon. First off, thank you so much for your service to our country and the military. And also thank you for your service to helping founders all around the world be waymakers. So we really appreciate your time and being a guest on the show today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, guys. I hope everyone just keeps doing hard things.
Yes, and that's our tagline at the end of everyone, and you did it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Keep doing the hard things this week, and we'll see you on the next one.